other sport, or at least I'm not aware of any other sport, where the acceptance of individual risk to die is so high as in mountaineering. It's even glorified. And I think it's just outdated. We need to change our thinking.
Welcome. Today I'm happy to welcome Lukas Furtenbach to the podcast. Welcome, Lukas.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Of course. It's my pleasure. Lukas is a very well-known mountain guide and the founder and CEO of Furtenbach Adventures. His company has redefined, I would say, high-altitude expedition guiding through innovation, but always with a very strong commitment to the safety of their climbers. Over the past 2 decades now, his expeditions have achieved an extraordinary track record, including a rare zero fatality history on Mount Everest. Lukas has pioneered techniques like hypoxic conditioning and is now exploring the use of Xenon gas for pre-acclimatization, which potentially makes it possible for climbers to attempt to climb Everest in ever shorter times, faster times. However, these innovations, of course, raise questions about safety, ethics, and the evolving nature of modern mountaineering. Today, I want to dig into this with Lukas, get his insights into the future of high-altitude guiding, as well as the wider role of science and technology in the mountains. So, Lukas, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much.
I just want to remind our listeners that we are sharing Lukas's voice and knowledge today to deepen our understanding of ourselves and the mountains. And at Uphill Athlete, our mission is to make the profound experiences that we've personally had in the mountains accessible to more people, much like Lukas does through his guiding. If our work has inspired you, please consider joining one of our training groups, following a training plan, or working with one of our coaches. Your support helps us sustain this work and empowers you to unlock the full potential of your mountain experiences. So, Lukas, let's start off by, can you just tell me what hypoxic conditioning is and why it's helpful for high-altitude climbing?
So in a nutshell, hypoxic conditioning, or we call it hypoxic pre-acclimatizing, is using a tent with a generator that is simulating the oxygen level of a higher altitude. So you simulate altitude and you trigger the same processes in your body to start with acclimatization, adapting to this lower oxygen level that would also happen in real altitudes.
How is the simulated altitude achieved? How does it work?
So these generators, they have a filter built in, a zeolite filter, and can filter oxygen out of the environment air. And then either with a mask or a tent, a sleeping tent, or just a head tent, make an atmosphere with this lowered oxygen level that correlates to a certain altitude. And this certain altitude and oxygen level can be set on the generator.
Okay. So you're not changing the pressure in the tent or at the mask, you're changing the relative availability of oxygen.
Yeah, so these systems are all normal baric hypoxic systems, so the pressure stays the same. It's not changing the pressure to the levels that we have in high altitude, but as what is known in high altitude medicine so far is that the oxygen level is the component that is important to trigger the acclimatization processes in your body, and not pressure.
And how did you start using this kind of, I think it's called a normal baric hypoxic conditioning or normal baric hypoxic pre-acclimatization, as you say. How did you come to start using this? What's your personal history with it and the history with it in regards to guiding in the greater ranges?
So I started using this normal baric hypoxic pre-acclimatizing in 2000 or 2001 for a research study at the University of Innsbruck with Professor Martin Burtscher, who was one of the leading researchers in this field. And I got there as a test person, and I found out that the first time I could use this hypoxic pre-acclimatizing at the university in the laboratory So the mobile systems have not been ready back then. I found out that it works perfectly well for my expeditions, for my private expeditions, my personal expeditions. I was very surprised how good my acclimatization was. I had the comparison to real altitude to a traditional acclimatization. So I started to work with these systems, and then soon the mobile systems, like mobile generators with tents and masks, came out. Actually, they first came out for cyclists to make a form of high altitude training during the races. And these mobile systems were a game changer. So you don't have to go to a university or clinic to a hypoxic chamber. You could do it at your home with just a system that costs maybe, including all accessories, $5,000. And it's 25 kilograms, 50 pounds. And you have the whole setup to simulate altitudes up to, if you want, up to 9,000 meters. So I started using these systems for all my personal expeditions. We started using just to get experience with it, data. Mm-hmm. My friends started using it just to see if it works. The first studies came out in 2005 and 2006, I guess it was. And then in 2007, for the first expeditions in Pakistan and Tibet, 2006, 2007, we started using it for the whole team, for the whole group in our expeditions. And we could see that it's not only working for me or other people that are in altitude a couple of times every year, but also for regular clients that have one altitude exposure per year maximum and that haven't spent so much time in altitude before. We could see that the acclimatization is I would go as far as saying the same quality as a traditional acclimatization, but even better. People arrived at base camp better rested and recovered. They didn't waste energy on doing rotations on the mountain. So from the beginning, we could see that people who used hypoxic system for acclimatization performed better on the summit days. For example, after the summit, coming down as far as possible is important for us as a guiding company. We want everyone as low down as possible. If you say Everest, after the summit, we want everyone back in Camp 2 at 6,400 on the same day. That's a long way down. People who use hypoxic pre-acclimatization and have not done the rotations on the mountain have been significantly better performing on the descent after summiting. That was the first eye-opener for me. And I said, okay, it makes a difference, a huge difference. So we started further exploring the possibilities if we can not only use it for in enhancing our acclimatization, but maybe also make the duration of the expedition shorter, shifting one part of the acclimatization process from the mountain to our home. And in this time, 2000 years, it was very new, this idea. Like, people have been acclimatizing on other mountains, climbing this mountain and then going to an 8,000 meter peak and doing a fast ascent. This was not new. But shifting the acclimatization process in your bedroom was new. And there was very little experience with that and very little data and very little studies. So we just tried, and we went further and further. Martin Bocher from the University of Innsbruck was very supportive and helpful in this time, and he developed all the acclimatization programs with us. We started to make expeditions shorter by making the and that's maybe wrong to say. The expeditions didn't become shorter. It's just that the location of the expedition changed or shifted from Nepal to your home country. So when a traditional Cho-Yu expedition, let's say, in this time was 8 weeks, we said, okay, let's do 3 or 4 weeks of hypoxic sleeping at home and then make the expedition only 4 or 5 weeks. So it's the same duration at the end, but the location of the acclimatization went home. with all the benefits it has. It means less rotations on the mountain. It means being with your family, being at the job, being at home when you have an infection and getting sick. You just open the tent and you are at sea level again. You can recover faster. You can eat better. You save energy. And of course, you have less exposure time in a dangerous environment. And this is when it became important for us as a guiding company, because as a guiding company, we have a moral, but also a legal, more important, a legal obligation for the safety of our clients. So everything we can do to make an expedition safer, we have to do. It would be a legal problem for us if there is a possibility to make an expedition safer and we would not use it.
Right.
This is another reason why, for example, we can't let our climbers climb without oxygen on Everest. It's a legal problem. Even if we wanted to, it's not possible for a guiding company. But yeah, again, we started to explore what is possible. And already back then, we could see the potential that we were thinking that one day we will be able to have the full acclimatization process, including rotations, including high camp nights at home, so that you fly or however reach a mountain only to do the final summit push. We started in Pakistan on mountains like Broad Peak, or in Tibet on mountains like Choyu, and then used this approach on Everest only when we had our first Everest expedition. That was 2016. We didn't touch Everest because the Everest market and the Everest guiding landscape was so competitive that with people like Russell Price, like people at IMG, Alpine Ascents, companies that have been guiding there for years or decades, and famous guides. And so we couldn't see how we could enter this market. But and I personally had never an ambition to climb Mount Everest. So in 2016, we got a chance to film a documentary on Everest. And we said, okay, this would be maybe our step into the Everest guiding market. But if we do it different. We try to make a short expedition. The experience with hypoxic pre-acclimatizing we had from Pakistan and Tibet, we bring it to Everest, and we try to make an Everest expedition in 6 weeks. 6 weeks was revolutionary in 2016 for an Everest expedition. The average Everest expedition was 8 to 10 weeks. So 6 weeks was pretty progressive, but we said, okay, we can do this. We did a whole team pre-acclimatizing at home with hypoxic system. We flew to Mara Peak with a helicopter. We climbed Mara Peak. It's a 6,000 or 22,000 feet mountain close to Everest in the Khumbu Valley, to do a safety rotation there, to see if the hypoxic pre-acclimatizing worked for everyone, because everyone was watching us. It's our first Everest expedition. It was, difficult.
Lots of pressure.
Yeah, a lot of pressure. It went well on Island Peak. From there, we went into the Everest base camp, and we climbed Everest with the whole team. We had one guy not summiting. It was a doctor, and he was afraid of his hands because of cold fingers. But the rest of the team summited, and it was less than 6 weeks. So it was, for us at least, our proof of concept. And we knew immediately, okay, two learnings. We have to move to the north side, to China, because it's a mess in Nepal. And the second learning was we can do it much faster than 6 weeks. So next year we moved to China, to the north side, where everything is more restricted and regulated than on the Nepalese side. The Chinese implemented a monitoring program. So as a new guiding company, you had to go through a monitoring program of 2 or 3 seasons, so that the authorities can check how you operate, how you run your expeditions, if you have accidents and all this, how your clients perform, are they experienced, or do you bring anyone to the mountain? It went well in 2017, and we already had this project of one guide of us climbing the mountain in 2 weeks from home. It didn't work out at the end because he became sick in base camp with a flu. So we stopped it for safety concerns. But we could see that logistics would work and acclimatization was perfect. We then, the expedition was 4 weeks, everyone summited, everyone was healthy back down in base camp. And then we said, okay, this is the new benchmark will be a 3 weeks, 21 days expedition for Everest. That we launched in the summer from 2017 for 2018. First time we called it a flash expedition because we needed a name. Some of our competitors already had names for this form of expedition. We called it a flash expedition, and when we launched this idea or this product, let's say, we were sold out for the next 2 years within 2 weeks. So the market was waiting for this expedition, and you can say you like it or you don't like it, and you lose some of the experience if your expedition is that short. But for many people, 8 or 9 weeks is just not an option because of the family, business, job, whatever. When we launched this expedition, we had a lot of criticism, like. We were called like we are we will be killing people. It won't work. Nobody will summit. It is doping. It is cheating. It is whatever. So the same things that are coming now with the new Xenon stuff, and the same voices, by the way. But we proved them wrong the following year in 2018. Again, a full team, everyone summited in, it was exactly 21 days. So it was a full success, and we could see, more is possible. We can do this even quicker. But still, we said, okay, as a product to sell to clients, we need this 21 days because this involves some spare days for weather, for politics, for whatever can happen, route fixing problems. Yes.
Yeah, I want to share my experience with hypoxic conditioning because, as we both know, like we're about the same age, and so we came up really close to the same time, both as mountain guides but also as climbers. And I tried hypoxic conditioning in 2003 for the first time. Slept in the tent at my home at the time before an expedition to Masherbrum. I didn't notice, honestly, like an effect, and I decided that the reason was that it had taken too long to get from, and you got to remember, like I was climbing with a couple Slovenian guys. Our total budget for all 3 people, including airfares, was $8,000. We're like, shopping for our own food in the markets, like, so we don't quite have like, it took us because of that 14 days. And I think you'll agree, like it was just too long between the last session in the tent and getting to base camp. Right. Like, and I realized that was too much time. And I was like, okay, that was an experiment. Then the next year I tried it, going up to Alaska, going to Denali. Had a similar problem that time, but for different reason. We just couldn't fly onto the mountain, and we had to wait until Kitna for quite a number of days. And again, like got up on the mountain, went straight up to 14, and felt pretty much like I always felt when I went straight up to 14, and thought, okay, well, this doesn't work. But I didn't know that I really could not separate it between, is it just the time that I'm losing all the pre-acclimatization effects by the travel and the bad logistics, or is it just not working with me? I didn't really know. And I think it's really interesting because what you had a very different position, I would say, that is very advantageous for sort of uncovering these correlations, which is that you were going to relatively, if not the same mountains, like quite similar mountains with similar logistics, with similar altitudes, with similar people, and you were doing that repetitive, or you were iterating on that pretty fast, right? So for me, it was like, as a struggling, professional climber barely scraping by. It was like, man, this is kind of a big expense. It's not really helping because every time I get stuck with logistics, it takes too long. So I'm just not going to do it anymore. Right. And that was sort of the end of my, my investigation. Of course, I watched as, you and other people started doing this, and as a mountain guide and knowing the community, like I was absolutely paying attention to that and watching these developments. I was very curious to see how it would work, but I personally never really used it. We tried when we started coaching when an uphill athlete was started in 2016. We started coaching athletes. We were sometimes getting athletes that wanted to use this, but the problem was that we internally didn't have the expertise. Like at that time, we didn't know, like if it was one of your climbers that was going with you, you're managing that with the climber directly, right? Like if you're telling them what altitude to sleep at, and of course the coach was looped in, so they knew how to manage the training and recovery around that additional stressor of sleeping at a simulated high altitude. But we didn't know what the right, I guess, dosage. I mean, it sounds like a medical term, but what the right dose and what the right timing was with the altitude. And so, and we didn't really have that internally until the last few years. And I think that a couple of things have really changed in the last few years. One, it's enough time has gone by where you and others have done this enough times where it's like, oh, okay, yeah. Like, for example, I coached Roxanne Vogel, who was, actually, I didn't coach her. Was I coaching her then? I did coach her for a while. I can't remember if I was coaching her or if Seth was coaching her, but Uphill Athlete was coaching her at the time. She went and did the 2-week round trip of Everest with one of your competitors as the guide. But nevertheless, it was like, okay, like she went from San Francisco. And granted, she's an absolute beast of an athlete. She's an incredible athlete and but it's like, okay, she did that. Like, it's obvious that there's something here that's working. We just didn't know what it was. And then after that really triggered it. And, bringing on some additional coaches, like our current director of coaching, Chantel Robitaille, specifically in this area, has a tremendous personal interest in this as well. So then we started to have enough, gather enough of this internal information as the coaching team to start to understand what the dosages should be, what the timing needs to be, and also looking at it from our perspective of like, how do we integrate the training stimulus and the recovery prescription within the context of pre-acclimatization protocols. And that really, in the last, I'd say really a year ago, it really gelled. And we're like, okay, we know how this works now. We understand it. We've been around it enough. Also, I think you and others have really helped us understand the dosage and timing is actually it's not a, how do I say this? It's not it's something that requires a pretty fine touch. You can't just go sleep in the tent a bunch. Yeah. You have to really know what you're doing. And it's much like training. When you apply a stress, you do it not to torture the person. You do it to elicit a physiological response from the body. And with these applying the pre-acclimatization stress, you need to do it quite precisely and in the right order. You need to do the right things in the right order at the right time. And it takes quite a lot to learn that. And you've known that. You're kind of the pioneer of that, but others of us have now kind of caught up and figured it out. But I think part of it, there's a bunch of reasons why guys like me didn't figure this out and guys like you did, because you had, this captured group of people that you could regularly go to the same place. You could do these tests, and you were experimenting. You were developing. You were innovating, being like, okay, well, that seemed like too much. What about this? It's the classic way that innovation is made in sports physiology as well. Is like the innovations never come from the laboratories. It's almost always the other way around, where coaches and athletes experiment and fiddle and start to see things and kind of follow their noses. And then something works. We're not really exactly sure why. And then later the scientists can come and be like, oh, okay, this is when you do this is what's happening. Therefore, there must be a causality.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's a good point. Uh, Especially that was one finding and one learning, and it was a hard way of learning this over years, with many failures, and uh, that you have to follow. Let's start like this. Acclimatization is very individual. So like
100%.
you will acclimatize different to me, and so it's different from every person. So of course the acclimatization schedule or protocol is also different. A standard acclimatization, as we see in traditional expeditions, are trekking to base camp and then doing rotations, and that's an itinerary for a whole group. It might work for the most of the group, but not for all.
Yeah,
that's
the middle of the bell
one
curve.
reason. Yeah, so that's one reason why we still see so many people failing on traditional expeditions with developing any form of altitude sickness or even HAPE or haze. So the crux or the point was, our most important learning was to use individualized protocols to understand that every person acclimatizes differently. It needs a different protocol for sleeping in the tent, a different progress of sleeping altitude, a different amount of total hours spent in an average altitude. We have different responders. We have responders that are more responding over SpO2, and we have responders that are more responding with their heart rate in different stages of the acclimatization process. You have to consider all of that. So only someone with experience or a perfect data pool is able to individualize your acclimatization protocol with a hypoxic tent. That's also a reason why we can see so many do-it-yourself hypoxic acclimatization attempts fail every year, or competitors that are just trying with standard protocols because they don't understand how it works, and then their clients arrive in base camp, get HAPE, and are flying out with a helicopter the next morning. And that's a problem for us as well, because then people see this and think, oh, it doesn't work. These people have been using hypoxic tents for pre-acclimatizing, and still they get HAPE in base camp. But I can say that never, ever, any of our clients, and we had a lot now, has developed HAPE in after a fast approach to base camp.
I want to shift the conversation now to your latest innovation that is, as you pointed out, turning out to be very controversial. And that is the use of Xenon treatment for pre-acclimatization. And I want to just frame this up quickly for people that, well, this is, I think, the main sort of, I guess, allegation, if that's the right word, or criticism, is that this is some sort of, shortcutting of the process, or it's doping or something like that. And you alluded to those criticisms earlier. I want to call out that, they once did a study and they tested the urine in the toilets, the Cosmi cut, about this, right, in Mont Blanc. And they found the whole spectrum of performance enhancing drugs in that. So climbers have been trying to dope for a long time. I mean, it goes back as old as the history of mountaineering, where climbers used performance enhancing substances, or at least what they thought were performance enhancing substances, like methamphetamines and other things, way back, like in the first ascents of many of these 8,000 meter peaks. I'm not saying that makes it right or makes it wrong. I'm saying that we need to recognize that humans searching for pharmacological or technological aids to help them do what they want to do, climb these mountains, is nothing new. And to your point, you are providing a service, and that if you can allow someone to achieve a dream with less time commitment, or rather by shifting the duration of the acclimatization, for example, more to their bedroom at home, and spend less time away from their businesses and their families and so on, that there's people that want to do that. part of my aim here with this podcast is not to tell anyone how to think, right? Like I want to, you to have a platform to share your thoughts. I want to be able to share my thoughts, and our listeners are intelligent people. They can come up with their own opinions and decisions, and will tell us, eventually what they think, which is part of what's great about this format. So let's go to Xenon. First of all, what is Xenon gas? Where does it come from? And what are the physiological benefits of it, particularly as it regards to acclimatization?
Yeah, so it is important because there has been so much misunderstandings in media in the recent 2 weeks that I think it's important to give this context. Xenon is a noble gas that is part of our atmosphere that every one of us is breathing every day. You can, with a technical system, you can you can extract xenon from the atmosphere, and then you have xenon as a medical gas that is used in medicine, in anesthesia, for more than 75 years now. It is a very safe, very well-researched gas with very little side effects. One side effect is that you can get a little bit dizzy. Of course, you can get unconscious. It's used for anesthesia, for surgery. So, but it is considered as a very safe medical gas. A lot of research going on right now with xenon in the field of Alzheimer research and Parkinson and different other forms, because xenon has some side effects. One of them is it is neuro and cardioprotective, for example. Another one is and that was found out by coincidence. It triggers your own body's EPO production. So, and that is one misunderstanding. We are not working with synthetic EPO as a substance that is injected like we all know it from the cyclists around Lance Armstrong in this area. This has nothing to do with this. So it triggers EPO production in your body. So that's a natural process, and the same process is triggered when you are either in real altitude or in simulated altitude. Xenon is just one other way to trigger this process, and let's call it one of the processes that is making adapting to a lower oxygen level. EPO in your body is, and I put this very simple because I'm not a doctor, I'm not a researcher. So EPO in your body is responsible for the production of red blood cells. So ultimately, this will increase your hematocrit. This is the same thing that happens when you are acclimatizing in real altitude or in simulated altitude. We use xenon as one form of a wider acclimatization strategy that consists of a hypoxic sleeping protocol, active hypoxic training, intermittent hypoxic training, and the xenon treatment. We found out that the xenon treatment is enhancing your acclimatization. We are not using it for enhancing performance because this is something that we still don't know if this is really happening. There are some studies that there would be an increased performance after a xenon treatment. That's also one of the reasons why it is on the international list of prohibited substances from the International Anti-Doping Agency. But this is not our intention of using it, and the intention is to have an enhanced acclimatization with the goal of a safer expedition. We are not. It became now big in the media, a big story, because we are telling this xenon story related to a 1-week expedition. It was the missing link for us to go out with it was always an idea of mine to have a 7-day Everest expedition, 7 days from home to home. I think from logistics, it's absolutely possible for a fit climber who can also maybe skip one or the other camp. But to make sure that the acclimatization, we didn't want to cheat on this. We didn't want to let someone climb somewhere else in Argentina or anywhere and then fly to Nepal and climb Everest in a week. We wanted to have it right, like the full acclimatization process at home in Europe or in the US, and then from home to the mountain and back within 7 days, just to show that it's possible. It will never be a big market for this, but just to show what is possible. With these forms of acclimatization, like intermittent hypoxic training, active hypoxic training, and hypoxic sleeping protocol, we were very confident that this is doable. But we still had this idea that we need just a safety backup in the acclimatization. We have a lot of safety backups on the mountain. We have a very good safety infrastructure on the mountain with oxygen everywhere, with redundancy in oxygen systems everywhere. At any time, a climber is on the mountain. But still, we needed a backup for the acclimatization. And Xenon was the missing link. We have been experimenting. We did the same as with the hypoxic tents 20 years ago. There's not much data. There's not much scientific studies. That's true. So we started to do it ourselves, just test, trial and error. But it worked so well from the beginning. And then we say, okay, this must have a lot of potential. We widened the circle of people who were testing it, and it worked so well for every single person who was trying to use it, that we had, finally, we said last year in 24, when I climbed Everest using only Xenon acclimatization, nothing else, no hypoxic, no intermittent hypoxic training, nothing else, just the Xenon. And that was for the second time on Everest. I did this on Lhotse, I did this on other mountains, and it worked so perfectly well. So now you can say it's because my body maybe spent so much time in high altitude that just the altitude memory is adapting faster, more efficient, whatever. Maybe I don't need any acclimatization at all anymore. But for myself, I could compare my experiences, how it feels arriving there and climbing the mountain with a Xenon acclimatization compared to a hypoxic acclimatization and compared to a traditional acclimatization. I had all these experiences, so I knew it for me. But of course, that's not enough to sell it to a client. That's why we are going to sell it as one part of the acclimatization only. But not only for the 7-day expedition, we will, of course, offer this for everyone climbing Everest or any 8,000-meter peak, just as an enhancer for your acclimatization.
Okay. I want to take a short side note into sort of what we know about the science of how Xenon works, particularly as it would affect endurance training generally, because I think that as you mentioned, it's a WADA banned substance. It was xenon gas bottles were found at the Sochi Olympics, and there's a whole story there if people want to dig into that. Most of the research around this that is published is coming from Russia. There are some, I'd say, questions about whether or not some of those results are either overstated or understated. That's another topic. But again, as I said earlier, the innovation usually comes from practice, and then it gets kind of verified by science later in most of these cases. So here's what we know. We know that Xenon affects a key mechanism involved in stabilizing a protein that is called HIF-1 alpha. So HIF stands for hypoxia-inducible factors, and then they give them numbers like 1 alpha after that. Under normal conditions, normal atmospheric condition, HIF-1 alpha gets broken down pretty quickly. But when it's stabilized, which happens at high altitude and also in certain interventions, and Xenon is one of them, the adaptations that come out of this are the boost in EPO production, erythropoietin production, and a higher red blood cell count. Now, that gets a lot of attention. As you said, that's been mostly what's in the news. I think that people need to realize that's probably not the thing that's happening here that's really important. So, for example, red blood cell production just takes a long time. It takes weeks. And so the kind of scientific consensus, as I understand it, is that you need about 100 hours in hypoxia to get a 1% increase in your hemoglobin. So, and that's going to be a 4 to 6 week process. So you're talking about a climb of taking 7 days. Like, obviously, red blood cell new production isn't increasing in 7 days. It's that process is starting, but it's not going to be really the reason that explains these changes. Another thing that's derived from this HIF-1 alpha is the new blood vessel formations. This we know, so that could be part of it. New blood vessels are especially in places like the heart muscle, that's already very vascular, that has a huge effect. That's very important in high altitude climbing. Another one is there's a shift in glycolysis, which means that seems to be better anaerobic energy production, which is, anaerobic, of course, we all know the production of energy in an anaerobic condition or without oxygen. So this may not really apply to high altitude climbers because we never really go anaerobic when we're at high altitude. People are like, oh yeah, I must be anaerobic because there's not much oxygen around. And then it doesn't work that way. You're still aerobic. A really important one is there is a better cell survival in the low oxygen environment when you've undergone a xenon treatment. And this seems to have both a metabolic pathway, and it's not well understood. And there's also a pathway that is mostly researched around cancer. There's something called, and I'll probably say this wrong, apoptotic pathway. And that is the process whereby the cells know when to die, right? And it's often the reason it's of interest in cancer is like this is sometimes turned off in tumor cells, right? They don't know when their time is up, and they just keep growing. So there may be something in that. It's very complicated and frankly not very well understood, these areas. And then the other part that I think is very interesting and with regards to acclimatization is the vascular regulation. So it essentially affects the NO production. I'm going to go into high altitude physiology a little bit. When we breathe more, we blow off more CO2. And when we blow off more CO2, again, I'm going to simplify, it changes the pH of our blood. And so when this vascular regulation happens due to the xenon treatment, it may be helping that balance. Again, this is pure speculation. We don't know exactly what it works, but we know something is working. So medical science kind of uses some of these effects of xenon for treating things like anemia or ischemic conditions, but we know it has been used artificially for sports performance to boost endurance. And a lot of coaches will say, like, when people ask, like, what supplements should I take? What should I do to improve my performance? Is like, well, just go check the WADA list because that's all the stuff that works. If it didn't work, it wouldn't be banned. So, which I think that there is some real truth to that. So we don't know. And a lot of times when things get put on the WADA list, a lot of research is either goes underground or it is just stopped, right? And so this is a big topic. How do you respond to people when they say that using xenon in addition to these other therapies is doping?
I would say doping or the WADA list only applies to a regulated or a competition sport. So commercial guided expeditions on Mount Everest are no competition sport. It's not about records. There's no regulations about how fast you can climb, how much support you can climb. It's just no competition. The other thing is we are not using a substance. It's something, because this is something, it came on the WADA list after the WADA inspectors found Xenon equipment at the Russian cross-country skiers in Sochi. But the Russian cross-country ski federation is still fighting this WADA, this WADA, the ban, because they argument that it is not a substance because it's in the atmosphere, and that's actually it is very in detail, but it is a good point. For example, the FIS, the International Ski Federation, they put oxygen on the list of prohibited substances. So for skiers, in competition, it is not allowed to inhale pure oxygen right before the race. Another thing is that substances like dexamethasone are on the WADA list as well, and are used by climbers, on a regular basis. Not only for treatment of an emergency, but especially dexamethasone is used for prophylactic or even for performance enhancement. So I would say my approach is it would be doping if a substance is used for performing, for enhanced performance to reach a certain goal, like reaching a record, reaching a podium in a competition. Using it for increasing safety on a guided expedition in a dangerous environment as a form of enhanced acclimatization, I don't see it as doping.
I think I want to just call out, because the audience will if I don't, that, I personally built my whole climbing career on the premise that we as climbers should, strive to match the mountain's challenges, not to reduce them or change them, right? But I also believe that one of the core tenets in life is that the mountains are freedom, and that I don't want to dictate what people are allowed to choose or not choose to do, or choose not to do. I think your point around organized competition, in an organized competition, there are rules so that the competition is, let's say, fair. Like, people can show up at a starting line and they can see who is the fastest skier that day, for example. And that's the whole sport is to do that, right? And mountaineering is more or less the antithesis of that in my mind. It's there's no starting line. We don't even know when the climb's going to start. It's the freedom of the hills, as we like to say sometimes. So I think you have a really strong point with that. And I myself have called oxygen, using oxygen like high flow rate oxygen for climbing, as doping. And I remember when I said that, and then I thought about it. This was years ago, when I was probably 20 years ago, when I was in my early 30s, and I was all fiery about this kind of stuff. And I thought about it, and I was like, what difference does it make to me if people want to do that or not? Like, it actually doesn't, as long as, yeah. So I kind of come full circle on that myself. And I also, as a coach, have now for years taken great pleasure in writing books and coaching and educating athletes. And many of them go climb mountains like Everest, and many of them have used supplemental oxygen and other things like hypoxic conditioning and now Xenon to allow them to make the ascent. And they have incredible experiences that are not really, arguably not accessible to them without these interventions, including the training, right? So I sort of feel like, that's kind of an argument in my opinion, I've put to rest. Like, I don't really see how we can call this doping. Is it ethical? I think that's a different question, because ethics are different than rules. Rules apply to organized competition, as you rightly point out. Ethics is another thing. So, the next topic then, I think, is like, tools like Xenon or using a hypoxic tent. It's been argued that they detract from the purity, the beauty of mountaineering. So how do you personally, not for the rest of the world, but for you and those that you're responsible for in the mountains as a mountain guide, how do you define these ethical boundaries of what is acceptable technological and pharmaceutical aid, and how do you navigate that? How do you think about that?
That's a very difficult question, because I think it's different for me personally, my approach to the mountains when I go climbing for myself, or when our company is having guided clients and we are responsible for them. And I come back to the beginning when I said, as soon as we take responsibility for the safety of a climber, we have limited possibilities. We have to work in a frame that keeps the client safe and that has client safety as a number one priority. I think it is important to understand. A good example for this whole ethics discussion is the use of oxygen. So you have one extreme, Reinhold Messner, who is saying real alpinism involves the risk of dying. If you can't die anymore, then it can't be alpinism. It must be tourism. And on one side, I 100% agree that that's true. And for outstanding professional athletes like yourself, this is the way like you would go or you have been going to the mountains in your career. And this is the style you choose for your climbing, a pure and ethical, pure and clean style, without technology, without aids, without cheating. Let's call it cheating. Cheating is making things easier on the mountain. But this is not the reality for most of the people that go to the mountains. And for most of them, dying in the mountains is not an option and is not part of the game. They want to go there to enjoy the mountain, nature, freedom, in their style they choose. So obviously for us as a guiding company, it is not an option that our clients die because we are not using all the safety and all the cheating tools that exist. We come to oxygen. Yes, we have an obligation to use oxygen on guided expeditions, because oxygen is the number one factor why people would survive in this extreme environment. Everyone, including professional athletes, including people like Reinhold Messner, would come to a certain point where they would die up there without oxygen. It is international medical consensus in science that these extreme hypoxic environment will cause damage on your brain, on other organs, if you stay there for too long time. There's only one way to avoid this, and that's using bottled oxygen. You can say oxygen is cheating, yes, because it makes the mountain much lower. It feels much lower for your body. It's much easier, but it's still probably the same experience that a climber has. The same enjoyment, the same view from the summit, and within their possibilities, maybe the same amount of effort they have to put in to reach the summit. It's just a different style of climbing, but it stays the same mountain to climb. And that's what you said. I like this. It's the freedom of the mountains, and everyone can choose his or her style to climb a mountain. And I think this is so important, and we need tolerance against other people who choose a different style, as long as I do not harm other people or bring them into danger. And what we can see as a guiding company, with a lot of infrastructure on Everest, with a lot of support staff, guides and oxygen on Everest, we have to provide our resources to people who climb in a pure style every year. We see people dying up there in a pure style every year. So if people are now criticizing us that using something like Xenon would be dangerous, would put our people at risk, I have to tell them our climbers will never be the problem on Everest. Our climbers that are always climbing with oxygen, with a guide, with experience, with training program, with good equipment, with safety backups, they will never be the problem on Everest. People that are inexperienced, people that are taking shortcuts, people that are climbing without oxygen, these are the people that become the problem on Everest every year. So now we saw this statement from the UIAA that was recently released, questioning if using xenon as acclimatization could be dangerous, or at least I would say they state that it is dangerous. And what I'm missing here is what they are not saying, that our climbers that are using xenon, they will climb with oxygen. They are always safe. Nobody will die up there. But every year, people die climbing this mountain without oxygen, every year. So if there's a warning about a very dangerous style of climbing Mount Everest, it must be the warning of climbing without oxygen. And I know it may sound hard, but I think we need a shift of paradigm here, especially in Europe, in German-speaking countries. This idea or almost an ideology of climbing without oxygen is the only true way of climbing an 8,000 meter peak. It's just, in my opinion, it's just wrong. It is one way to climb this mountain, but not the only one.
Yeah, years ago, when I was probably about 30, I used to work as an avalanche forecaster as a mountain. I was in my role of a mountain guide for a heli ski operation. And part of our outreach that we did was to the snowmobiling community, the ski-doo community, right? And of course, we were heli skiing, so obviously people would say that there's something wrong with that, probably. But for me, as an alpinist and as a mountain guide, like these sled heads, as we called them, they were like, they were culturally very different than us, right? Like they showed up at the parking lot usually really late. They were definitely not, what we considered athletic or any of these things. So I went out and did like a workshop, avalanche awareness kind of safety workshop with this group of about 12 people. And at the end, they wanted to ride up onto this ridge. And this is an area where riding is allowed. And there's these old mining roads. And we rode the sleds up onto this peak. And it was sunset. And everybody just shut off their machines. And they were just sitting there watching and this one guy who was like, 100 kilos, really big guy, very much culturally different than I am, very politically every way, right? And he just looked at me and he's like, God, that's beautiful. And that really changed my perspective, because I showed up that day ready to just not like these guys, right? Because they were different than me and had different beliefs and came from different culture and stuff. And what they most appreciated about the whole day was sitting there at the top of that mountain watching the sun go down. And they just, you're looking out over this incredible wilderness area, and it was all about the awe of the moment and seeing this incredible sunset and just being out in the winter environment. And it was like, actually, like, I'm way more like these people than I ever thought. And I think that this is sort of a similar thing. What I think we have to acknowledge is that, I can go climb alpine style. Not that I do very much of that, certainly not the Himalaya anymore. But, I could also appreciate people who go and climb Everest and use the tools at their disposal to make the experience as rich and rewarding and also as safe as they want it to become. And then they can dial that all the way down to, our friend Joost Kobla, who was recently on Everest West Ridge in winter by himself. I mean, yeah, that's the opposite. Like, you can dial all the way to that, and hats off to him. And that can coexist, right? Like, I think that both things Joost isn't going to be able to go and find that level of adventure on the South Col route in May. Of course not. But it's still available. He just has to change the knobs a little bit and make some adjustments. So I agree that we could all use a little more understanding and compassion, in a sense, for one another and for our differences. I think that a lot of people will say things like, EPO is also natural. It's produced by our body to promote, the creation of red blood cells, and xenon is in the air. So, but that doesn't mean it's not doping. And I think that at this point it gets like so down in the weeds that it starts to get a little bit like where the best answer to this is, that's great, and you don't have to use it.
Exactly. 100% agree on that. Yeah.
So, you've mentioned that a number of times, and I mean, it actually stands out that Furtenbach Adventures has a remarkable safety record on big mountains. And we know that there are unknowns with Xenon, right? Like, you've said you've used it on your, like, you took this process like you did with the normobaric hypoxic tents. How do you manage, particularly this season coming up, how do you manage the unknowns? I mean, there's different kinds of risk, right? There's the known risk, there's the and then there's also like the unknown risk. There's the things that could go wrong that we don't even know are things that could go wrong, right? Like, do you feel like you have a good handle on those, or do you feel like there's still some of those out there with this therapy potentially? And how do you manage that?
So I would say you're right saying that there's still a lot that we don't know, especially with Xenon. But I would say we know enough to run this first Xenon-supported trip with these 4 British climbers that are, by the way, all very experienced mountaineers, very fit athletes as well. We know enough that we are confident to run this 7-day trip with them without having more risk than with any other client or team we have. So we have 7 teams on Everest this year. 3 on the north side and 4 on the south side, on different schedules, on different itineraries. I would say this one Xenon-supported trip in 7 days has definitely not more risk. I would say even less risk than any of the other teams, and especially than any of the other climbers of the mountain, for different reasons. One reason is because they spend so little time on the mountain. So in risk management, it's a lot about exposure time. Their exposure time is very, very little compared to all other climbers on Mount Everest. The other thing is we have a double safety network for this first trip, because of course I'm aware that the whole world will be watching us and waiting for something to happen, for an accident. So we make extra sure that nothing can happen. And at the end, I know our operation. I built this operation.
Yeah,
so I know
you built the system.
How it works, and I'm so confident that it works perfectly safe. I never gave a guarantee that the 7 days will work out. That's a project. That's a planned 7 days. If it's 8 or 9 days at the end, there are so many factors that we can't control. Flight weather for the helicopter, even for the plane from the UK, it can be delayed. There's so many things. There can be delays with the rope fixing in the Khumbu icefall. So yes, it can be longer than 7 days, but it will not involve more risk for the climbers than any other expedition that we run.
Mm-hmm. And I think one of the nuances that I think is lost in some of this debate at times is that you're changing one variable of many, right? You're not changing it's not like you're throwing out everything else and just doing, let's just do this intensive Xenon program and nothing else, then we're going to go up there in 7 days. No, you have all these other things and you're adding one additional thing. And you're also probably pretty confident that if you remove that thing, that these 4 guys have a good chance of of pulling this off in a short time frame too. This may just give you that extra boost. Am I wrong?
You are absolutely right, and thank you for bringing this point, because you're actually the first one who understands that these people are still climbing in the same style as everyone else, with the same support, with oxygen, and they are pre-acclimatizing with different acclimatization systems, and it's just one component that we change. And you are absolutely right. I'm also confident that they could do possibly the same 7 days, even without Xenon, or even without the hypoxic and intermittent hypoxic training. I'm not confident that they could do it without any of them.
Right.
But
of course,
the combination makes it not only possible, but even safe.
Yeah. What do you say about the criticisms, and this isn't necessarily limited to Xenon, but just around the commercialization of Everest? And, of course, there was a lot of publicity when there was this photo a few years ago of all the people on the ridge going up from the South Col, where the Hillary step used to be, and so on. How does Furtenbach Adventures fit into that, and how do you see your role in this?
So, overcrowding on Everest south side is a problem on certain days in the season, or let's say it can be a problem on certain days in the season if we have a very limited amount of possible summit days.
Yeah.
We had this situation in 2019 when this picture was taken from a Sherpa from NIMS, but we had other seasons in the years after, with in 22, I think it was, a consecutive period of almost 30 possible summit days.
Wow.
So almost the whole season you could summit.
Incredible.
Every single day. We had no problems with people with traffic jams on the Southeast Ridge, nothing at all. But yeah, it can be a problem, and of course something has to be done about it. I would say what China was leading the way in this regard when they implemented a system where they gave full responsibility of the experience and the performance level of the clients to the operator, and with all the consequences. Like when you bring people that are not enough prepared or experienced to climb Everest from the north side in Tibet, and it results in an accident, you will never run an expedition in Tibet again. That's simple. And you as a guide and a guiding company take full responsibility for all consequences. That prevented the companies that cannot guarantee for the quality of their clients. If Nepal would follow this path, there would be no more problem on Everest. It also involves minimum safety standards, safety protocols for all operators. If this is coming by law from the government, no more problems on Everest. But I understand that Nepal is in a different position than China. Nepal needs the income from Everest tourism. And it's not that easy to implement these rules and limit climbers as China is doing. The limitation of permits on the north side in China is 200 or 150. It changes every year a little bit. But compared to the unlimited permits on the south side, it makes a huge difference. You have something between 450 and 480 permits for foreigners, and then twice this amount of people climbing as support staff. That makes 1,300 people in one season. And the actual climbing season within this 2 months frame is only 2 or 3 weeks. So 1,300 people in 3 weeks, that's a lot. We could think about different ways, like going back to the autumn season, after the monsoon. With climate change, this season is becoming more and more attractive. We still need more weather data but when you look at the last 10-year period, you can see that the autumn climbing season on Everest would become better in terms of wind and temperatures of 8,000 meters. And that was always the limiting factor for the autumn season on Everest.
Yeah. Autumn is certainly colder than spring. I can personally attest to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a couple things that come to mind. One is I think I've done 12 expeditions in Nepal and in the spring and have never seen 30 days of good weather. So that is exceptional. But the other thing I think that, has always been kind of a part of my attraction to lightweight expeditions and small climbing teams is that, our impact on the mountain is lower, right? So I think that part of the potential benefit of these combinations of these therapies, for lack of a better word, I'm just calling these all therapies, maybe they're interventions, I don't know the exact precise best term here, is that people spend less time on the mountain and therefore there's less overcrowding, right? Like if all of a sudden it shifts and in 10 years from now or 5 years from now, everyone is, that's going to climb Everest with a mountain guide is doing a 7 to 14 day expedition, that significantly reduces the strain on that environment, right? Like in every way, there's just going to be fewer human days above base camp. There's no question about that. And so in some ways, some of these innovations could have a net positive effect on the overcrowding and environmental impacts of climbing in these fragile environments.
Yes, absolutely true.
One of the things that you have been willing to do for 20 years now is innovate and to frankly, like, deal with a lot of criticism, and criticism not just from, random people. Like, let's admit, like, our community is small. Like, we all kind of know each other, right? I mean, and even historically, like, your grandfather was a famous mountaineer, right? Oswald Oltz. And, you've been part of this community, like, from arguably before you were even born. And then you're getting these criticisms from people who are part of our community. And yet you kind of, I don't know what the right word is, but you push through. I don't know, is that a personal drive of yours? Is that, like, are you really, like, is it a conviction and a commitment to client safety? Are you thinking about, like, are you curious about, like, scientifically how all of this works? Like, what goes into that? What like, it's a lot of people simply would not put themselves out there the way they may even have all the ideas and have all the abilities to make the changes that you have made over the years, and they just wouldn't, because they're just like, I don't want to be a target for all these attacks and deal with all of this. I mean, that's a good it's a good reason to not do something like that, but yet you do and have persisted, and you continue to persist. What is your thinking around that?
I think it's a combination of all the motivations that you mentioned. Uh, Definitely, I'm burning for this. Like, I really want to make guided high altitude climbing. It's a big difference, and it's important to say this. Guided high altitude climbing, commercial Everest climbing. I want to make it safer because I truly believe that you could avoid most of the people dying on 8,000 meter peaks today in guided expeditions. And what I truly believe is that it's really time for, as I said before, for a shift in the paradigm. Like this ideology of climbing without oxygen is the only true and real and legit way to do it. It's just I think it's a very traditional way of thinking, and it's just not the best way forward. There's no other sport, or at least I'm not aware of any other sport, where the acceptance of individual risk to die is so high as in mountaineering. And it's not even not only accepted, it's even glorified. Like, dying in the mountain, you become a hero. There's no other sport in the world where this is accepted. And I think it's just outdated. We need to change our thinking. And I think the Americans, people from UK, they are much further ahead of us. We in old Europe, in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, it's much of the German-speaking countries where alpinism started. We still have a very traditional thinking. And I think it's time to change this. And this is one big part that drives me, because I see people dying in the mountains every year because they do not follow the simplest safety rules and do not. Like friends of mine died, and I stopped counting in the last 20 years. How many people died without oxygen? The last one was one of our elite guides, Louis Stitzinger, who died on Kanchenjunga climbing and trying to ski down his 8,000 meter peaks without oxygen. He was such a great and experienced guide. He died because he also followed this idea that it is a great achievement to climb all 14 8,000 meter peaks without oxygen. And it is a great achievement. It is outstanding if you can do this. But you can do this for yourself, but you can't ask someone else to do it only this way. Otherwise, I wouldn't count it. Otherwise, like your summit only counts if it's done without oxygen. Mm-hmm. Because so many, especially young climbers, follow this ideology. And their achievements only are important to the community if it's done in this pure style. But let's look at this. How many people die? How many young, talented climbers die? And then if they die, it's always, how could this happen? Why this young, talented climber died? He died because he followed this idea of this pure style of climbing is the only way that counts, the only way that gives you respect and credibility in the community. And I don't like this idea. Too many people die.
Yeah, I can't disagree with the statement that too many people die, and I'm like you, have lost count. So many thoughts. One is, I had a great discussion on one of my Voice of the Mountains episodes with Will Gadd, the Canadian climber, and he had a way of putting it of like, if someone has a different way of doing something, and he had a specific example around climbing in the Canadian Rockies. There were some young kids, and he, instead of calling them out for what they had done, he called them in. He brought them into the community and started to kind of mentor them and see their perspective, right? You mentioned this paradigm needs to change. I would say make a slight change, and I would say that we just need to be more expansive in our definition, that both can exist. That people can go and they can climb, in a very pure style. And, like I would, not trade my experiences that I had alone on K7, for example, for anything in the world. Like that was such an incredible group of experience, and it's such an incredible time of growth in my life. And the athletes that I'm coaching right now that are going to Everest, some of whom are climbing with Furtenbach, they're also going to have incredible, and the mountains enrich all of us. And we shouldn't say that, one is an acceptable means of enrichment and one is an unacceptable. We're all climbers. We're all out in the mountains because we love being in the mountains. Some people want to and are able to accept more risk, and they should do that, honestly. Like, this is one of the things that I had to kind of come to terms with as I got older, and I got really, really sick of my friends dying. As I had this really strong attachment, right, to my friends not dying. It sounds funny, like, right? That seems like a pretty natural thing. And after, I don't know how many times, it was just crushing me. It was just crushing me every time I got one of those phone calls. And I finally kind of came to this realization, like that they had to do them. Like, they had to go do their thing, what they wanted to do, and I couldn't control it. And they weren't doing it to, I don't know, seek my approval or something like that. They had their own personal reasons for doing that, and they wanted to do that and there may be consequences to that would lead to, them losing their lives. And that wasn't my responsibility. And as soon as I was able to kind of do that and really integrate that, it made it much easier for me in the ensuing losses. I mean, it never gets really easy, right? But got me to the point where I was like, okay, like, yeah, that climber was out there doing what they wanted to do. That was their vision. That's so cool. Like, I'm happy for them that they lived their vision. I'm not happy that they died, and I don't think there's anything about the platitude that they died doing what they love. They don't want to be dead. Like, that's ridiculous. But that they were at least living according to their own values and allowing everyone to have that, right? And that goes both ways. You can't have that just your way, right? Like, if you're going to accept that for yourself and your friends, you have to accept that for others too.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, absolutely. It's a coexistence. That's the key word.
Oh, it's big enough. I mean, people will disagree with this, but I think it's big enough for all of us. I'll share one final story as my youth as a mountain guide. When I was in my late 20s, I went and I was working in the Teton Mountains as a mountain guide. And the Tetons in the States are, at that time, and this was like 2000, 99, 2000, somewhere in there. It was kind of the birthplace of American guiding, which happened completely isolated from the rest of mountain guiding in the Alps and also in Canada. So it grew its own tradition. And I was in the heat of my like purist era, right? I was in my late 20s. Had been a IFMJ mountain guide for a few years. I was one of the first to do that in the US. So I was kind of an anomaly. And I had all this official training and I'd done all these exams, right? And then I come in here into this like traditional bastion of climbing. And we had one of our team meeting, like our all guides meetings in the middle of the summer. And this one guy who I really respected, I mean, he'd been on Alpine style attempts of the Route Ball Face, which, as you know, is a very special place to me on Nanga Parbat, like way back like in the 80s and stuff. And an incredible climber, just was like, had lived his whole life in the mountains. Older at this point, he was probably like in his 60s, and he had like bad knees and he had like the ski poles, and he was like, you could tell he was in pain, like just being out there, right? And he got up and he's like, I'm out there when I'm guiding and I have this, and this in my backpack because this, and this, and this, and all these other things could happen. And my responsibility professionally is to make sure my clients are safe, right? And then I see this guy House running around with this little backpack and his tennis shoes, and he can't do anything to help his clients if something goes wrong because he has like, 10 meters of rope and one piton and whatever it was. And, at first I was like, kind of like upset, right? Like felt like I was being attacked, but then I just sat on my hands and I didn't say anything, and I let the conversation around me develop, and I was listening to the different people talking, and I was like, you know what? He's right. Like, my responsibility is to, when I'm working as a mountain guide, is to ensure the safety of the people that have hired me, to ensure their safety. That's the first, and get them to the top of the mountain if that's something we can do within those parameters of safety. And it completely changed how I approached mountain guiding. Like, I never went anywhere without, backups to the backup after that. And, I think it served me really well. And it meant oftentimes that my pack was heavier and that my days were harder and all of those things. And one of the things that I really appreciate about you, Lukas, is that, your backpack, both actually, but also like just emotionally, has been much heavier than most. And I think it's because you've taken on the work of really doing everything you can in the name of your clientele, the climbers that sign up for you, and take their trust that they place in you for their safety more seriously than most. And I think that that's really commendable, and you've been a real pioneer in that way. And I hope that over time you start to get to hear that more and less of like, I don't know, you're destroying mountaineering, or I don't know, whatever these internet trolls are saying about you, because everybody's entitled to their own opinion, of course, but at the end of the day, like, you're out there innovating for the safety of your teams and your fellow mountain guides as well, and your Sherpas that work with you as well. And, you have the track record to prove it. And I can only hope that you're successful with this next evolution. And I'm happy that myself and the other coaches at Uphill Athlete have been able to partner with you in helping train your athletes for these expeditions. And I just really hope that this season goes well, and that everybody comes back and has another data point to make that next change, that next little adjustment in the dial that leads to that safety net, because that really is what it is. It's a safety system that you've built. So thank you for coming on, and thank you for sharing your thoughts.
Thank you very much, Steve. Yeah, it was a pleasure talking about this stuff. And it was the first time that someone with expertise and someone really looking at it and was talking about the whole, especially the Xenon stuff. There was so much misinformation in the last 2 weeks, and it was a relief to talk to someone who was prepared about this topic. Thank you very much for this.
Yeah, you're welcome. Well, it's very interesting. Like, I think it's very interesting. I think there's a lot of, I'll be very interested to talk to you when you get back from this trip and debrief how it went and see what we can all learn, because the mountains are big enough for all of us, and we all can help each other. So thanks for doing that work. And how can people find you and follow you and follow your expeditions this spring, and particularly the Xenon? I don't know. You guys have a name? Are you the Xenon expedition now? Are you the 7-day expedition?
Yeah. So for now we call it the 7-day expedition. The Xenon treatment will be available as an add-on for all the others. You can find and follow our expeditions on Instagram, Furtenbach Adventures, or at the website, FurtenbachAdventures.com.
Great. Thanks very much for your time. We'll talk to you when you get back.
Thank you very much.